Good day, HG Tudor. How are you?
I trust you're well also.
I am very well, sir. I reached out through a third party to discuss narcissism in the psychic industry. I have been a psychic
Yes.
for some time. I've been a professional psychic for over 35 years, and
Hmm.
I have encountered a great deal of narcissism, godlike behavior in the industry. I really was curious about your take on it.
Well, I've been a narcissistic psychopath all of my life. So, seeing as you're telling me how long you've been a psychic for, I thought I'd meet in response. If you're asking me to what extent have I come across narcissism amongst the psychic community, um, as I explained to you in the email when we exchanged correspondence, I'm firmly within the realms of being a cynic about this type of world. But what I do say is, because I often talk about there are differing perspectives in the world, that you have a perspective with regard to the use of psychic abilities, if I could describe it as such, that I don't necessarily share. But that doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong. It just means that we have differing perspectives, in the same way as I explain to people that the narcissist sees the world in a different way from non-narcissists. It's neither right nor wrong. It's just a different perspective, and it's important that people recognize that. Now, within the field of those wielding supposedly psychic abilities, you will invariably attract a number of narcissists to that arena. Long-standing viewers of my work know that the narcissist goes after something called the prime aims, but this is done subconsciously. So this is the need for control and fuel and character traits and residual benefits. And there are certain areas in life which cater to that better than others. So if you think of it like oil fields, there are some oil fields which are bigger and more fulsome than others. So the entertainment industry is very attractive to narcissists. Politics is very attractive to narcissists. And to some degree, the world of the spiritual and the psychic is attractive to narcissists. Why? Well, let's talk about somebody that has got psychic abilities, which is the ability to perhaps see things that others can't. If I could just describe it, I'm sure it's more than that, but we'll use a sort of layman's explanation. That means that the psychic is somewhat special. Well, narcissists regard themselves as special, so there's an immediate attraction. It also means I know something you don't know, or I can tell you something about yourself that you might know. That's a conduit for exercising power over somebody. I'm going to interpret things that have been going on in your life so that you can understand it. That's a conduit for power. People will respond to this, which provides the narcissist psychic with fuel. It allows them to take bits off other people and pass it off as their own character trait acquisition. And the residual benefit may well be that the psychic could make a very healthy living from all of the exercise of their psychic powers. Now, leaving aside the issue of whether somebody's got psychic powers or not, okay, the fact is that as a genre is attractive to the narcissist. Now, let's approach it from the cynic's point of view, which is mine, namely, there are no such things as psychic powers. Okay, so therefore, somebody coming along and saying, I've got psychic powers, would be viewed as potentially magical thinking and grandiosity. Now, that's not to say when somebody thinks that they've got psychic powers, that makes them a narcissist. What it means is that to a cynic such as I, it would be viewed as exhibiting a degree of grandiosity to claim that you've got the secrets of the universe that you can unlock, or however you might describe it. And the fact of being able to uh, see things about people could be seen as magical thinking. So again, because narcissists experience grandiosity and also magical thinking, an area such as psychics appeals to them. So you're going to get quite an overrepresentation, I would suggest, within the field. Now, oddly enough, I don't spend a lot of my time knocking around with psychics. It's not a community that I'm overly familiar with. But that said, what I have noticed is that amongst certain narcissists that come my way, they often claim to have psychic abilities and psychic powers. So there is a clear overlap. And I make it clear that not everybody that claims to exercise psychic powers would be a narcissist, not at all. But I understand why it's a field that's interesting and draws narcissists to it. And narcissists are often rather good at reading people. And as a consequence of that, it enables the narcissist to manipulate people. And one aspect of this is that there will be certain individuals who are suggestible to the concept of psychic powers, which means that they are vulnerable to the presence of a narcissist because the narcissist will sense that as somebody that's malleable to being manipulated more easily than other people. So a narcissist, even though they're an unaware narcissist, is not only attracted to the psychic environment because it's a nice hunting ground for them with the prime aims, but it also means that there is a greater likelihood of individuals who would be more susceptible to manipulations by virtue of suggestibility. So you're going to get quite a few that would see it as a happy hunting ground for them.
Certainly. It is a position of perceived authority without any certification or education that really goes behind it. Now, that being said, I am a college educated, university educated person. I did not study psychic ability when I was at university. I studied English and history.
Yeah.
But there really is no qualification and there's no litmus test for proving if you're right or wrong unless you track it. I
Yes.
do teach and coach psychics as well. And that's one of the things that I tell them right away. Keep track of your readings, keep track of what you're doing. I agree with you. I do think that narcissists are actually implementing an intuitive, albeit possibly psychic ability when they are scanning a room. And, I posit to you, when you walk into a room full of people, you can scan that room and find a good fuel source. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. I was also going to go on to state that with the ability to understand people as well, empathic individuals would be drawn also to the concept of the psychic, because particularly what I describe as the contagion empath is those individuals that have a visceral reaction to the feelings and thoughts of other people, and they're very much in tune with them. So what one might describe as, so I created a video some time ago about essentially the way that me and my kind are able to, for want of a better description, sniff out our victims. And as a consequence of the way that a person holds themselves and the way that they conduct themselves, that signals to me that that person would make a better victim, say, than the person stood next to them. So the way that the person talks, the way that they conduct themselves, the way that they hold themselves out, the things that they talk about. And I've written a lot about this in Sitting Target, about the identification of victims. But even just walking into a room, there are certain people that present themselves as more apt to be a victim than others. And that is a combination of, I have been designed, if you will, to pick up on those signals in a particular way and interpret them. So in the way that a shark scents blood very readily because it's got an enhanced sense of smell, I, as a narcissistic psychopath, have a set of abilities that have been calibrated in a particular way to pick up and pick out victims more readily. So similarly, one can see that the argument is that an individual who has psychic abilities might be describing a sort of similar ability, but in a different way, a different description rather. So I read people as a consequence of my narcissistic psychopathy to determine, will this person make a good victim or not? You will read them in a different way. I mean, may I ask you, if I was to say to you, define to me what a psychic is, what would you say to that?
So a psychic for me, and to be sure, I'm going to disclaimer this. When I work with my clients, I tell them, I'm not telling you your future. I'm not saying you are going to meet X gentleman on this corner of this street on this day at this hour. What I am telling them is about possibility of encounters. And astrologers will do this. I'm just getting into astrology. I'm going to work on a certification for astrology in the next year or so. That is, again, a lifelong study. Astrology will tell you there are different times of your life, according to the planets, that you will be more likely to have success or more likely to have failure. I can do that with reading cards, scrying, just doing a psychic reading where, I have one girlfriend who calls me up at 11 o'clock at night and constantly wants readings. She's adorable. I love her to death. But and I can do that. I can roll over. I can just give her a reading on the phone and tell her what's going on. I'm particularly adept at reading the motivations and intentions of others, and I apologize to your kind, because sometimes I derail your kind when they're interfering with my clients' lives. And I can advise my client how to conduct themselves for optimal results for their goals, if that makes sense. So am I telling individuals, this is your future, it is infallible, no matter what you do, it's going to happen, suck it up and just deal with it? That's not really how it works. As much as I can tell people there is an individual who is trying to manipulate you at work, or there's an individual that is trying to manipulate you in a relationship, and this is how you can best manage yourself for minimal damage, minimal collateral impact. So it's very similar to what your channel is doing, but more on a specific point. So whereas you give a broad brush of narcissists and how they will affect fuel sources, I can do the counter spell, if you will, and tell people how to maneuver themselves around that. So defining being a psychic, I mean, there are various types of psychics. So some individuals are mediums. They see spirits, on the regular. Some people are just very good at reading the intentions and motivations of others. That's me. I'm also a remote viewer. I'm a gifted remote viewer, which is kind of having like a psychic telescope, and you can go look at other places, describe areas. I just recently taught my husband how to remote view, and he is exceptionally adept at finding lost animals, and he's a man of science. I want you to know he's a convert. I converted him. You can literally find lost items, lost dogs, lost people, those sorts of things by using remote viewing. So that is really a very trackable psychic ability. So there are a lot of different facets to being psychic. Some people just have spontaneous precognition, where they just know something is going to happen. A few minutes before they get into a car accident, they go, ooh, I think I'm going to be in a car accident today. And then bang, they get hit at an intersection. So defining psychic ability is precognition, second sight, being able to see the motivations behind people. When I meet someone who is ill-intended, I do have a reaction to them. I do have almost a physical reaction to them. Hey, the hair on the back of my neck goes up, that kind of thing. And you're immediately put off. Now, for you, the narcissist, you may recognize that as just an empath feeling the intensity of the narcissist. Does that make sense to you? Whereas you kind of have that energy exchange?
I mean, thank you for explaining. You touched on astrology there. I'd be interested to understand this. How does a burning ball of hydrogen with a bit of helium in it, and its juxtaposition to other burning balls of hydrogen, how does that tell somebody what's going to happen in their life. It is chemicals up in the sky.
I agreed. And like I said, I am just starting to get into astrology as a discipline. I know enough to be dangerous. Like, somebody says, "Oh, I'm a Scorpio." I go, "Oh, you're a real sex bomb, aren't you?" If they're a Cancer like me, I'm like, "Oh, you're a big emotional, sponge." Having just a
Yes,
broad.
but those are premised, aren't they, upon constellations? So how does a constellation of a burning ball of hydrogen translate into telling you about your life?
I cannot answer that
Okay.
unless we go a year in the future when because like I said, that is a really a study that you can do your whole life. I mean, I've been studying the tarot for my whole life. That is really that's what I teach to my students, and astrology is something that is its own discipline. So
Well,
and my
is it the belief? What I'm trying to get at is that if I go to see a doctor, okay, and I say to him, "Doctor, my arm hurts." And so he examines my arm and he waggles it and he asks me some questions. And then he deduces that I've got some form of inflammation. He's done so because he's applying medical training to a visual observation of my arm. Okay, so he's utilizing knowledge with examination. Okay, so that's why he's able to then say to me, Mr. Tudor, you've got inflammation in your elbow, tennis elbow, whatever you want to describe it as. So you need to run a course of these anti-inflammatories, and everything should be all right. But what I'm interested in trying to understand is that, say, with astrology, is it the suggestion that the stars have some inherent power, that they send some information to people that they then interpret it? What's it based upon? How can a star know?
Correct. So I'm presuming, and it's not necessarily stars as much as planets, but if you want to get scientific about it, there would be different gravitational pulls, different blockages of energy and light waves and things like that that would affect the conditions on planet Earth when an individual was born. So I believe that the energy is really like a matrix, that the universe is an energy matrix, kind of like a piece of cloth. I describe it to my students as a piece of cloth. So there's different threads that will go through that. So if you drop a rock in the middle of a piece of cloth, energy would go around it. The influences would go around it. We can call it influence. I dislike when people talk about energy because it's so non-specific, but that is, partially, and again, I am not an expert on astrology. That is partially the influence that we see there, is that some energy would be blocked by, say, Pluto. Interestingly enough, one of my very, very good friends is a novice astrologer, and she explained to me that Pluto is in a path right now that it has not been in since 1775. And Pluto will destroy and then build back up. And I thought it was very interesting. We were discussing the implications of changing world powers, changing political views, Donald Trump being reelected to the United States. And she does believe that that is an influence of Pluto, which we have not seen since the American Revolution. So,
how does Pluto influence anything, given that it's a dwarf planet millions of miles away?
well, I mean, it depends on what side of the fence you're on that dwarf planet. I still think Pluto is a planet, but I also think it's a remnant of an old planet. Again, I'm not an astronomer.
Well, leaving aside splitting hairs about whether it's a dwarf planet or a planet, how does a dwarf planet stroke planet influence anything millions of miles away?
So, the greater universe and the greater energies that are out there would be either blocked or permitted by those moving planets. So, that's really, I think, where we get that influence. So, but again,
So Pluto blocks some energy, does it?
mhm,
So then what happens?
Then it would just influence the construction of the person that is going to inhabit that body as they're born. So curiously, if you look just at the sun signs, and I don't
Mhm.
want to get too deep in the weeds on this again, because like I'm not a an astrologer by trade. If you look at the sun signs specifically, you will find commonality in behavior, how people work with other personalities. You will find some commonality in that. And you will find commonality for people that are born on similar dates. So you will see some of that. But again, in about a year's time, I will be much more knowledgeable. There's also three different kinds of major astrology. There's Vedic astrology, sidereal astrology, Western astrology. So, there is some difference between those, but there's also some commonality in terms of how the planets are affecting people when they're born, how time periods are affecting people when they're born. But for me, I talk more in the possibility field, whereas astrology will give you a star map, if you will, of
Mhm.
possibility of success or failure. I am looking more in the micro, in the moment. Will I get this job? Will I land this job interview? Will I meet the love of my life? How do I deal with my annoying sister-in-law? Those kinds of things.
Okay.
So
So let us for a moment assume that there is some merit in this astrology about telling you whether you're going to succeed at an interview or not. Given that it is written in the stars, presumably I just can sit there and go, well, the stars say I'm going to get this interview, so I'll just turn up and it's a slam dunk, isn't it? What happens when I decide that I'm going to walk in and I don't know, sit on the desk and start to caress the chin of the interviewer, but and thus probably diminish my chances of being, well, it depends. They might get turned on, I suppose, but it diminish my chances of being given the job. But how does that come as against what the stars are telling us?
So I always talk to my clientele about something called practical practice.
Hmm.
So if I say, hey, you're really qualified for this particular job,
Hmm.
it looks like they're looking for the same type of person that you are. The practical practice is to go in there and present the attributes that that interviewer would like best, and I can uncover that through cards, through psychic ability. I can say, okay, they're really looking for someone who is unfettered, can travel a great deal, is going to really give 150% for this particular position.
Well, I think
Um,
ordinarily you would always want somebody that would who would be dedicated to the job, wouldn't they?
Certainly, but there are certain attributes, like I referenced travel. Sometimes there are positions that want excessive travel. This is I just did a reading for one of my clients, and she just had the opportunity to open up and travel much more. And
Mhm.
so we have been looking at some possibilities for her where employers are looking for someone who is ready to, roll up and get on a plane and travel around 6 7 days a week. So those are the kinds of things. I mean, and truly there are some jobs where they want you to do 99%. They just want you to do your job. They don't want you to advance. They just want you to come in and be a drone. Which is fine. Sometimes we will uncover those kinds of conditions when we're looking at different positions that they are applying for. So if someone wants to advance, we can look for positions and kind of examine interviews that they're going on, if there are opportunities for advancement, or if it's a drone position, if they just want to coast for the next couple of years until they get to retirement, until they start having children, we can find a job that will just have them coast and just be a 99 percenter, if you will.
Surely the job description tells you all of this. You don't need somebody to read some cards for you.
It on occasion they do. I know that I have been doing a lot of employment readings since the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of younger people did the corporate shuffle, and I come from a corporate background, so I understand the mechanisms that go into that. So, yes, the job listing may say, hey, we need someone, but what we're seeing in the United States is must have a master's degree, must travel, must do this, $40,000 a year. So, helping people uncover the ones that are more appropriate for them does make sense. Also, there's a great deal of competition. I mean, I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I was looking at some other opportunities in my former corporate life, and I was applying for jobs that had 35,000 applicants. It's right there on the listing, 35,000 applicants, and all right, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring and see if they look at mine. So trying to whittle that down. I know the job market here has been very, very competitive in certain industries. Tech is a big one. It's a bloodbath in tech right now. So I have talked to a lot of tech people in terms of employment. I see them pretty regularly showing up in my schedule. So trying to uncover where they can find a home that isn't going to be doing layoffs or anything like that is challenging, certainly. But if I can give them.
So what is the difference between someone coming along and saying, this is my skill set, these are my qualifications, these are the places that I've worked, these are the things that I'm good at. And here are some listings of jobs with all of the various descriptions. So you'd marry up your skill set, your qualifications with the prospective jobs that are out there. So for instance, if you're a coder, you may well look for coding jobs. That makes sense. And you can see that there's a senior position which would be apt for you because you've got 10 years in the industry and you've worked in a different programming languages, etc. So what would you do that enhances any of that?
So here's a great one. I had an individual who reached out to me. They were looking for advancement within their industry, within their current company.
Mm-hmm.
And a listing popped up on their internal message board. And they said to me, this is exactly what I want. But it's really weird because they didn't talk about this position. Can you look into it? And so I looked into it, and they actually had someone that was earmarked for the job. It was a similar position that it was
Sorry to
similar.
interrupt you. When you say you looked into it, what does that mean?
I did a psychic read on it. So we looked at all the conditions around the position. I can do that. We take
And
the
when you do a
position.
psychic read, sorry, I keep interrupting you. It's because I want to understand what you're doing.
Sure.
What is a psychic read? Do you mean you're getting tarot cards out, or what is it?
A combination of just, closing my eyes and going, okay, this is what I see about this position.
Okay, thank you.
And I use the cards that, on my YouTube channel, I use the cards because it gives people something to look at. They don't want to stare at my face all day long. So,
Well, I'm sure you
and
do yourself a disservice in saying that. But so you close your eyes and you channel your abilities, your power to examine this issue. Okay.
correct, correct.
So what is this? So, for example, as I mentioned earlier on, when I'm looking for a suitable victim, I know that I'm looking at what are they saying? How do they present themselves? What does their body language tell me? What might their hobbies and interests be if I'm able to discern those for either doing, looking at their social media profile that I've done or talking to people that might know them. So basically, I gather information and interpret it. And I have the ability to do that very quickly, that my brain is organized to assimilate actual information and interpret it to tell me as the predator, is this somebody worth going after? So that's the process.
Mhm. That's
Okay.
my process too. Except I don't have to be with the person. And
Your information is what?
I just close my eyes and
It just
it
comes to you.
presents. Yeah, it presents itself. So in a situation where you have a job listing,
Hmm.
my client was going after this particular job. Let's call it a director of blah blah blah. Um, I looked at the position and I immediately saw there was a man in the position. And I described what he looked like. He had short brown hair, had a little bit of a wave to it. He was tall, he was thin, very thin build. Younger, he was in his mid to late 40s. And I thought his name was Tom. And I said, I think they already have an individual in mind for this position. And I think his name is Tom. There's a Tom in there someplace.
Okay,
And
and
she,
that information just presented itself in your head.
correct.
Okay.
And my client said, "Are you kidding? They're going to give the job to Thompson." And I said, "Well, I don't know." I go, "Does this sound like Thompson?" And my client said, "Absolutely, yes, this sounds like Thompson." Within 2 weeks, Thompson had the job. There was a guy that person worked with, and it was a young guy. He's very quiet. He's very unassuming. No one really saw him as a social climber, and they had actually created this position for him to advance him because he was a tremendous worker. So, the position was already taken. Now, I do the same thing with, I have a tremendous clientele that are real estate agents, and I can help them pinpoint houses that they can add to their book. Approach the owners for possible sale, see if they're interested in doing that. That's actually one of my favorite readings when people are looking for a home for me to try and find it. And I use a combination of controlled remote viewing and psychic ability and tarot cards for that. If they come to me
So does a
with,
person come to you and say, "I would like you to find me a nice home"?
yes.
Okay, and so how do you know what is a nice home to them? Or do you actually elicit that information? They say, "I need 3 bedrooms, I'd like a jacuzzi in it, I'd like a Belfast sink, etc." Do they give you the specification?
So, more often it's an area. So, for example, Holland Park, they would say, "I need a home in Holland Park." And I would do a scan of the area, and it literally
And when you
is
say
like
you do
kind
a
of,
scan of the area, do you mean that in your head you're scanning Holland Park?
correct,
Okay.
correct.
And when you're
On
doing that,
occasion,
what's happening? Are the images flashing through your head? What's
yes,
going on? Okay.
yes. So
How do
I
you know
just
it?
want
How do you know it's Holland Park?
well, I mean, I can very easily just name off some streets. Like you actually can do that. Let me explain how remote viewing works before we go any further about real estate looking. So I do something that's called controlled remote viewing. There's regular remote viewing. You just close your eyes and you kind of drift off and you go to a location, be it Azerbaijan or Fiji or wherever.
Isn't that
Um,
daydreaming?
it is daydreaming, but when you are practiced at it, you will find signposts. You can pull phone numbers off billboards, things like that. You can describe people as they are right there. Controlled remote viewing is something that I studied with a woman named Lori Williams. She has a company called Intuitive Specialists. It's a great website. I encourage you, I have no affiliation with her other than I am a student of hers. There's a 3-day course that you can do on there and try out controlled remote viewing. And basically, what it is, it's a reporting format. And it's a very complicated, specific reporting format where you are writing down information. Up at the top, it's your basic name, date, location, where you are, what things are popping into your head already, putting those aside and kind of creating a blank canvas. And then you draw what's called an ideogram. You allow your body to do like a squiggle on the paper. These symbols are practice. So like a circle for me is natural, like stone. A wiggly line is water. And you just let your hand kind of go. Those items, they're different elements, they're different locations. You can create a whole lexicon of ideograms for yourself. And basically what the practice does, and this is what tarot cards do as well, because you have to remember the cards and the placing, the meanings of the cards. It tricks your logical mind into doing a busy task so that your psychic mind will present images and concepts, street names, things like that. So it's really a cool process. and anyone can do it. I personally believe that anyone can be psychic, and that's one of the reasons why some of the egoism that I see in my industry, I take umbrage with it, because I can teach anyone to be psychic. I taught my husband. My husband is a man of science. He did not believe, and he was just converted over the last few years, and he's had some really amazing experiences now that he's kind of opened himself to being more in tune with his intuition, if you will. So through controlled remote viewing, I can actually look at streets. I can draw a map. I think you would find it fascinating. There's a really interesting movie called Third Eye Spies, and it's readily available. You see it on Netflix or YouTube movies or whatever. But that is the history of it, and the history of remote viewing is from the Cold War. The United States government, realized that we had a lot of secrets that had been exposed to the Soviets. And initially they thought, it was by regular means, there were spies in our government. And then they discovered through the spies in our government that the Soviets were using psychic spies. They were actually using psychic ability to obtain information about our munitions and our military and the workings of our government. So we started doing it. And allegedly the program is not active, but I don't believe that. I do think that that is still active. I do think they still use psychic spies on both sides, on both the Russian side and the United States side. So, through that process, I can draw a map of a town. I can say this house is going to be coming up for sale in the next 6 months. This house is never going to come up for sale. I can say the dream house that you're looking at, there's 10 other people that are making offers. So be ready for a bidding war. I can do those kinds of things. So I can literally walk through someone's house. And someone just asked me to do a remote view on Putin. And I said, absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to do that. Just because I do believe that they have a lot of psychic spies on their end, and I don't want to intrude on that. I'm going to leave him be for now. But I can do that and walk through someone's process, walk through the actual house that they're going to look at. Some people are really troubled by that, but you use good ethics. There are ethics. I stress that in my teaching of psychics. Like, you don't just go and remote view your ex-boyfriend's house and see if he's got another girl there, or go remote view a board meeting and get some intel from that. It's just not ethical. And I have had people ask me to uncover information like, where's my ex-husband hiding all this money, and in those occasions I do have to decline to do that. It's just not an ethical or an appropriate thing to do. And I invite them. I say, well, you go learn remote viewing and you go figure out where that $50,000 went that you think your ex-husband pocketed. It's just not something that I would want to be engaged in. I just don't think it's correct. So does that make it clearer how I would do that?
I understand. But, so many people, of course, are curious as to who I am. And I naturally keep my identity hidden as a consequence of the fact that it would impinge upon what I do professionally. Given that you can undertake this controlled remote viewing, presumably you would be able to identify where I am and precisely where I'm sat.
I could, yes, but it does take some time, and I don't do remote viewing on my channel because it is a little bit boring to watch. For me to do a complete remote view takes about half hour to 45 minutes. And it's not very comprehensive as I'm going through all of the details on it. So I did do 2 remote views on Harry and Meghan's children, one for each of them. And they are on my channel, but they are for members only. I actually removed them when my channel started to get a little bit more traction, in order to protect myself from having some of the more negative aspects in my feed. I made those for members only. But if you'd like, I'll share those with you privately. I can send you a link to those privately, and
Hmm.
you can take a look and tell me what you think. But
So,
you know,
why hasn't Lord Lucan been found then?
who is Lord Lucan?
Ah, you're not familiar. He was a member of the British aristocracy who was alleged to have murdered somebody and went missing, but it's been stated that, I mean, he'd probably be dead by now, but it was stated that for a long time that he basically had he'd gone on the run and was there was questions about where was he, and he was being hidden by people and so forth. So there was a whole mystery about the whereabouts of Lord Lucan, similar to the racehorse Shergar that went missing and so forth. So there's often a standard joke about something that goes missing, and you say, "Oh, yeah, I found it with Lord Lucan and with Shergar." You see, so presumably those types of things that you and your brethren would be able to identify.
Yeah, and there is there is an organization that does do that. There's a few channels too that do that. Again, that, like I said, remote viewing is not incredibly engaging when you're actually doing it. Not as much as, like, throwing pretty cards around that have pretty colors and pretty things on them. But I'll tell you what, I will carve out some time later this week, and I will do the Lord Lucan remote view just for
Mhm.
you,
Well,
HT.
I'd be intrigued as to what may come out of it. I'd also be intrigued to do something that I could measure. You see, because you could tell me something about Lord Lucan, and I wouldn't have any real knowledge unless I was directed to go to a specific location to ascertain whether you were telling me something that was correct or not.
Certainly. That's called esoteric targets.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things when you start doing remote viewing, which again, is a form of psychic ability, again, psychic telescope.
Hmm.
When you start doing it, you should not do esoteric targets like a planet.
Sorry,
A lot of
I
people.
don't understand I don't understand the phrase "you should not do." That doesn't apply to the likes of me.
So, if it's when you first start, you need to be able to track your success in remote view. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to have proof of it. So one of the fun things to do, and through Intuitive Specialists, they have a bank of targets. The targets are just numbers, and they're hyperlinks on the website, and they're attached to a photo. So when you're doing your remote view, you write down your name, you write down all your format, and then
Hmm.
you would write down that number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you would do your ideogram. You would identify the elements that are in that. You would go as far as to draw the image as you get further and further into it. There's a point in remote viewing that's called the aesthetic impact, where you go from identifying there's water, there's stone, there's canvas, there's wood. You go from that point where all of a sudden now you're in the image. So it's almost like walking into the picture, and you would feel the creaking of the wood under your feet. You're walking on a dock, then you see a sailboat, there's your canvas. Then you look ahead, there's an orange building with the Spanish tile on the roof. You start to recognize all of those, and you can start to draw. The first remote view, and I keep gesturing to my husband's desk over here, I'm sorry. He's not here. The first remote view that I had my husband do,
Presumably, you know where he is, though.
he's that way. He's on the second floor. But the first remote view that I had him do, he very quickly moved into the aesthetic impact without being instructed. And the image that he was supposed to be viewing was two mountains, and there was an alpine lake in front of it. And he actually drew the angles of the mountains perfectly. The
Hmm.
left one was a little bit bigger, the second one was a little bit shorter, and the lake he thought was cold. He kept referencing cold. And then he got stuck on one of the mountains. He was like, there's a building there. There's a building there. And we zoomed in as much as we could on the picture. We couldn't see a building. But I thought it was very interesting that he kept that's something called doorknobbing, where you get stuck on an object in your remote view. And we use what's called a monitor to kind of direct us out of that. And so if you get stuck as the remote viewer on a particular item, your monitor can kind of back you off it. They're kind of like a spotter in gymnastics. They're just like, no, 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 come on back. I want you to go 50 feet in reverse, look in the other direction, look to your left, look to your right. So it's actually a very, very cool process, and it is a trackable process. That's one of the things that my husband liked about it, is that, you know, he could actually track his success. Now, the first successful remote view I referenced earlier, he's very good at finding dogs. We had a friend call us and they said, my cousin's watching our other cousin's dog. The dog got out. Can you guys do a remote view and see if you can find this dog? And between the two, my husband was driving, so I was doing all the drawing. Between the two of us, we said there's a house here, a wooded area, and there was a path through it. And there was some metal objects in the distance. Well, it was a path that led to a playground, a children's playground right outside their neighborhood. And while we were on the phone in real time, they found the dog. They went to the park and they found the dog. He was running around where the kids would have been. So, you know, it was a success. You know, that is a trackable, successful experience in remote view. And
yeah, but presumably the dog's not going to get that far in that short space of time. So the areas within which you're going to be looking, let's say there might be 6 areas, so you've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting it right.
Well, we were not familiar with the area. It was, you know, pardon the pun, but remote to us. It wasn't someplace that, you know, they didn't say, hey, we're in blah, blah, blah town. You know, we just worked with the images that we got. And they were driving around in the car. You know, I think it was for about an hour or two before they contacted us. So, you know, and we didn't know those people. We knew the individual that called us. We didn't know either of the other parties. So, directing them, you know, on streets that we were unfamiliar with, you know, was a success. So, and I'm kind of hoping my husband retires soon. I'm kind of hoping that that's going to be something that he digs into a little bit more. We have a number of pet finding groups here. And I think it would be very interesting if he added his elements into that. I think it would be pretty cool.
How does your husband feel about the fact that you telephone him and say, are you at the store? And he goes, yeah, just getting something. But then there's the danger that you're going to remote view him and find out that he's sat in a bar.
We have a very unique marriage. We really do trust each other, but I don't that has never come up. You know,
Can you summon this power up at will?
I'm not sure I follow what you mean.
Well, for instance, if I was to say to you, I know you said it takes a period of time to do it, half an hour or so, but is it the case that if I were to invite you to do a remote viewing, you say you could start it now? You wouldn't need to start lighting incense sticks or start chanting over the large piece of fossilized salmon that I can see behind you or anything like that.
Fossilized salmon? Oh, it's salt.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's a salt lamp. Fossilized salmon. Yes. You know, it really depends. I mean, I do, you know, it's not like that. Like I don't sit and like meditate and like float up and, you know, do all kinds of crazy stuff.
But if you decide to invoke it, you can just close your eyes and off you go.
Yes, but sometimes there are no guarantees. So someone like you, so a skeptic, and I just actually read for another YouTuber who I will not name. I just read for another YouTuber who was a skeptic and was very delighted that I uncovered a number of things that they were not expecting me to uncover. So is it like reading a book? And that's one of the things that my students will ask me, like, a couple of years ago, I had a student who was adamant, like, when are my gifts coming in? When are my gifts coming in? And I said, you have to practice them. It's not like, those old fashioned stock tickers. Like, it doesn't just like, you're not going to get a story that unfolds. It's not going to be like a movie that plays. You're going to get images. It's like the aperture of a camera opening up and closing. You'll get images. You'll see your boyfriend showing up with a puppy. You'll see them holding something in their hand, and, oh, am I getting a puppy for Valentine's Day? You will see someone maybe throwing a ring behind them. They're throwing the marriage out. They're getting rid of the marriage. Those kinds of things. So some people are clairaudient. They will actually hear sentences. Good friend of mine, Alicia Wicker, she's a fabulous YouTuber. She really encouraged me to start my channel. Her and I are both clairaudient, and we hear songs sometimes. So, like, if you're doing a reading with someone and the relationship is failing, you'll hear "Hit the Road, Jack," or you'll hear a Donna Summer song or a Michael Jackson song, and that will require some interpretation. Hit the Road, Jack is pretty self-explanatory, but if you hear...
Might mean you're a traveling salesman, you've got to go somewhere, or you're going on holiday. I mean, this again, from a skeptical point of view with many of these things, you say, I can hear the song "Hit the Road, Jack." Well, if you're able to read that person, they've come and they're dabbing their eyes and they've talked about relationship difficulties, it's very easy to say, oh yes, I hear I hit the road, Jack. That clearly means that you need to end this relationship.
No, it doesn't quite work that way. Again, ethically, I have a couple of hard and fast rules. I never confirm affairs. And I never tell anyone what to do. So if I do a reading and the spouse is a complete monster, be it male or female, complete monster, someone who is ill-intended in the relationship, I will always say, I think a conversation needs to be had. It's an easy way for me to say, I think you need to uncover more information. I think there's more that you need to know about this person's intent.
So you are telling them what to do.
I'm sorry?
So you are telling them what to do.
I tell them that they need to do more research, that they, again, like, do your own research, for entertainment purposes only. But I do tell them that they need to inquire more. So I can see if someone is engaged in a third party relationship. I can see that. I see it a lot. But I will never say, oh, girl, he's cheating on you. Like, I'll never do that. And if someone, I do get the occasional individual who says, my boyfriend seems distant. My girlfriend seems like she's not paying attention to me. Are they cheating on me? I'll see it. I'll see it in the cards. I'll see,
Well,
blonde.
you're bound to, because they've just told you that they suspect that they're cheating. So that's hardly a great leap of intuition to find that out, is it?
So if they suspect that someone is cheating, they need to find the proof. They can't come to me for proof. Just like I would not go to...
So what's the point in them coming to you at all then?
To learn how to empower themselves to conduct themselves better within that relationship. So if there is, and I have a hard line with stepping out on your relationship. That's a non-negotiable for me personally. And, I would like it to be a non-negotiable for other people. But that is something because if you think about it, like, that's going to start a whole situation, and they do need to have the facts. So if I'm saying do some more research on it, that is find out more on your own. I think you should do more research into this before you suppose that this individual is cheating. In most occasions, they have some kind of indicator there. There's a new lock on the phone. There's a, they're hiding.
Wouldn't the simple answer be arrange for them to be followed and see where they go?
Yeah, they could do that.
Arrange for their calls to be listened in. Do they smell of different scents?
Yes, they could do all of that. But again, I would say cut to the chase and have that conversation. Have a conversation with someone, and if they're not forthcoming, then you know, maybe the relationship is not all that it should be. You know, it is you know, a sad moment with that. You know, we do have to be very careful about crushing someone who already maybe has crushed feelings. My goal when people come to me for a reading is that they feel better by the end of it, that they have further insight into how they can conduct themselves for their own optimal results. That's really what I want to do. And
Let me ask you this. I know that you don't necessarily say to somebody, "Oh, they're having an affair," but you say that you can see that that's what's going on. Okay, so what do you think of an individual who has suspicions that their partner is cheating? So rather than ask them, which would probably be met with a denial anyway, so that's fairly, not particularly clever route to go down. So your choice is you can either have them followed, listen to them when they think that you're not there to hear if they're making telephone calls, look at their browser history on the internet. Are they going on dating sites? Ask around, have they been seen? Basically do some investigatory work, which will enable you to find out, are they seeing somebody else, by essentially tracking them and seeing where they're going at times when you're not around. Or going asking a very pleasant lady, do you see it in the stars or through your powers? Which one do you think? And they decide that they're going to, rather than do all of that fairly straightforward investigative work, they're going to come and ask you, what type of person is that?
So some people will go to the psychic first. Some people will go to the more traditional means of uncovering first.
And what would you say? Would you say there is a type of person that decides, I will go and put my faith in the psychic
Yes,
rather than hiring a private detective?
yes,
What type of
yes.
person would you say that is?
So, that is someone, and this varies, I'll give you just kind of one of the examples. Someone who would come to me first is someone who is extremely uncertain. And that is why it's so important to have a gentle and ethical approach to them, because there's sometimes a certain amount of desperation that individuals will come to us with. And you have to be very careful, because that's where narcissism in the psychic industry gets a little bit dicey, because you'll have people that say, "Oh, you have a curse on you. You have this on you. This is why all your relationships aren't working out. You need to see me 5 times this year at $500 a pop." Like there are people that will do that. There are psychics, mediums that will peruse the obituaries and reach out to families 6 months down the road and say, your loved one has contacted me. We have some very good friends that had a very unfortunate loss. They lost a child, and again, two people of science, and they reached out to me and said, "Hey, how do all these psychics find everyone in our grief group?" And I said, I hate to tell you this, but they find them in the obits, and then they just kind of track those people. It's very unfortunate, or they might be in that group. So individuals that come to me that are desperately clinging to a relationship or desperately looking for information, I can do readings for them to empower them. I can say, yes, there are problems in the relationship. This does seem troubled. So you need to make a decision. Do you want to work on the relationship with someone who is possibly distracted by a third party? Or do you want to work on yourself and strengthen yourself so that you can walk tall into your future? And that's really it. I mean, I'm not, I am not, revealing all kinds of crazy things to people, like, oh, your Aunt Tilly left $1 million necklace in the attic. Can I find things like that? Yeah, if directed, yeah, if asked. But really, the idea behind what I do is to make people see the different options that they have and where they can go. So if an individual comes to me and says, I've already talked to a private detective, they've tracked my spouse is definitely cheating on me with this tall, willowy blonde. What do I do about it? And I go, well, let's look at, the what if. Let's see, what if you stay and you bear this burden? What if you leave? What does your future look like? What could be if you did something different? And that is really where I come from. Can I reveal magical things? Yeah, I can. But my goal is really to let people know that there's other possibility and that we can get optimal results if we just go in a different direction, if we empower ourselves, if we uplift ourselves, if we invest in ourselves. And that really is how I operate. Which is somewhat different from some other psychics, which are like, oh, I see your Aunt Tilly. Aunt Tilly says she's very unhappy with everything you're doing, and she wants you to take out a life insurance policy and make me the beneficiary. That, like, the reality, there are people that will conduct themselves like that in the industry. There are people in the industry that go, this is a gift. This is a gift, and no one else has it. I'm the only one who has it. It's very godlike kind of attitude, and I don't have that kind of attitude toward it, because I believe that anyone can be psychic. This is an ability that anyone can cultivate. One of the gentlemen on the behavior panel had a very interesting take on this, even though I don't think that they don't ascribe to psychic ability, so to speak. But one of them had said that women's intuition likely developed out of a prey and predator situation. So the females of the species are either tasked with being pregnant, being laden with children, or caring for young. So when predators would approach, at any point of evolution, when predators would approach, the females would already be burdened with the care of others. So they needed a bit more of advanced warning. So their intuition developed. They would hear things, sense things coming toward them a bit more than the males of the species. Males have faster twitch muscle response, better lung capacity. They could bolt out of it and sprint out of the situation. Whereas a female of the species would have to gather her young and take off and possibly, either be caught by the predator or lose some of their young. So,
yeah, so those that have that ability sense a predator sooner. Those that don't, they get weeded out by natural selection.
Correct. So, but it was an ability that, according to one of the gentlemen, developed to give, brooding females an extra edge. And I do see that with the some of the women that I coach, when they are in different periods of the change of life, they become more in tune, more naturally psychic. So I coached a medium a number of years ago, and she was a young woman, and she was, building her family. So she had an infant and she had a couple of toddlers. And she said, my problem is that I keep having spirits come to me as soon as I lay down, as soon as I'm done with the kids. And I said, well, the issue is that you're distracted when the kids are there. So you're doing something practical. And the minute you lay down, they're contacting you and giving you messages. I said, you have to set hours, just like a job. You have to say, I'm only psychic between, 7 o'clock and 10 p.m. And then, after that, everyone leave me alone. And then you can have a little.
Spirits obey notices like that?
What's that?
Do spirits obey notices like that?
They can. It really is more of us shielding ourselves from any input. Again, I as I said before, I'm not psychic 24 hours a day. I don't want to be. And I have one of my husband's coworkers invariably contacts me whenever we have a huge Oktoberfest once a year. We have about 150 people here. We make all the food. We're not German at all. We just like Oktoberfest. And one of the guys, it never fails. As soon as I get to like my fourth boot, he comes over and he goes, "Do reading for me." And I'm like, "I am really drunk and I am not going to read for you right now." "Oh, come
Mhm.
on." I'm like, "Make an appointment with me." He never makes an appointment, just so you know. But there are occasions like that that I just don't want to be tuned in. And here's a great example. My mother-in-law, she unfortunately passed away a year and a half ago. She had cancer and she was admitted to the hospital on an emergency basis at one point, and we had to race over there. And as we got in the building, I was in administrative mode. We were just trying to get there, get in, get our badges, get up to the cancer ward. And the minute we stepped onto the cancer ward, I was kind of blasted with all of the emotion that was going on in there.
Mhm.
So I immediately was kind of tuned into all of the patients, all of the staff that was there. And I kind of stopped for a second. And my husband goes, "Oh, you didn't shield yourself." And I said, "No, not at all." And so he said, "Well, just take a minute. We'll put you in the waiting room and just kind of settle yourself down." I mean, I'm not like, like freaking out or anything like that. It's just like walking into a loud room and you
Mhm.
have all of these voices happening at once, but it's emotions, it's voices all at the same time. So I went and I calmed myself down, and then my sister-in-law walked in and asked me for a reading. So, um, it all kind of works out in the wash. But environments like that, are very rich for a psychic. I love going to the airport. The airport's one of my favorite places to go as a psychic, and I unshield myself as I walk in, because there's such an amazing array of emotions and experiences that are going on. Mostly people are excited because they're going someplace fun. Rarely there are people that are going, dragging their feet because they're going to business or going to some sad event like a funeral or something like that. But it's always a really, if you ever need a ride to the airport, call me. I love going to the airport. I go in, I park, I go in, I wait at the carousel. Like it's one of my favorite things to do just
But can't you
because it,
determine all of that? I could tell you who's excited and who's apprehensive and who's upset. And I'm not psychic. That woman, she's got water leaking out of her face. So I've understood that she's upset. So it might well be that she's upset because she's leaving her beau behind, or that the beau is leaving her and she's seeing him off at the airport. And that family, the children are jumping up and down because they're going on their hollybobs. So I can
right.
understand that. And I have no psychic powers.
I disagree that you don't have psychic powers.
Well, I'm telling you, I don't have them. And I know we're not going to agree about this because you believe that everybody has, and fair enough. I understand your belief. But the point I'm making is I can determine all of that without feeling anything. I can see it.
Yeah, yeah. I do think that the way that a narcissist scans is very similar to what I do, but it's more of a visual effect, a regular sensory rather than extrasensory.
Okay. Yeah.
I can kind of parse out from a distance. Most of my work that I do, even people that are local that I do readings, I do them online. I very rarely meet with clients in person. It's just
Mm.
easier for me. I do back-to-back appointments most days. So it's just easier for me to jump from, electronic media to electronic media. And I don't require that I see or hear anybody. The pleasantries at the beginning. Hello, it's nice to meet you. Did you have any specific questions? And then I go right into the reading. So I actually prefer not seeing people because I don't want to see their reaction. I don't want to see them go, "Oh, I can't believe you put that out there.
Yeah.
I can't believe you do that." I prefer not to see it. So, and being half Italian and from New Jersey, I can talk a blue streak, obviously. I like to launch right into the reading and just tell them, do a stream of consciousness and tell them everything that I see. I will do checks like halfway through. My appointments run anywhere from, I do 20-minute appointment, a little itty bitty one, up to 2-hour appointment. And with the longer ones, I will stop about midway and say, do you have any questions? Is there any direction that you want me to go in that's different from where I am? They will direct me and say, no, I want to talk about my mother-in-law, or I want to talk about my dog. With the shorter appointments, I kind of do that at the end, and just say, is there anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about specifically? So I really do. And I do live readings on my channel a few days a week. And there's zero feedback there. Like they say, what do you think about blah blah blah, whether it's pop culture or themselves. And I will do the reading straight from there, not bringing them on camera, just having a very simple one line, hey, what do you think of this? So in that sense, I'm not cold reading. I mean, I know cold reading has kind of a dirty connotation here, because it does sound like people are trying to again, be shystery, kind of take advantage of people. And that I think is the thing that I want to stress the most is that what I do, I don't try and take advantage of people. I do have people that will ask me for readings repeatedly. If they're asking me the same question over and over again, I'll tell them, you have to wait. I can't book you. You have to wait. If you have a different question, I'll address that, because there is a certain client that will come to you for constant reassurance, a constant professional friendship, if you will. And you have to be very careful about that, because that does lean into taking, advantage of someone, making them dependent on you, taking financial advantage of them, which is not in my wheelhouse. I don't do that. I'm just not interested in forcing people to keep making appointments. I have a bundle that people can buy from me, but I don't say, well, at the end of the appointment, like a hairdresser or a nail technician, well, let's make your next appointment. I don't do that. I do have follow-up emails that will go out and say, hey, did you have any questions? Did any other questions come up? If so, contact me, blah, blah, blah. But I don't, my clients come to me because they trust my advice. They believe in what I do. And my clients come for a variety of things. Like, some will come for card readings for their romance. Some will come for remote views for a lost object, or if they're looking for a new apartment. So they'll come for a variety of things. I was recently certified in past life regression, for those that believe in past lives. And so I can do past life regressions for people, which is fun. Again, you have to be someone who believes in that. And I guide the person through their imagery and what they're seeing. But I always have them pull a date, and I always have them pull like a name of a town or a street name, wherever they are. And then we can do the research together after, and we can find those locations. So that's
I have two
really
questions.
Sure.
I have two questions. First one is, why are ghosts always seen in castles, never in the frozen food aisle at Walmart?
Well, they are. So that's
I've
like
never heard anybody say that they met a ghost in the frozen food aisle at Walmart. It's always in a suitably spooky environment, isn't it? It's a ruined stately home or a castle or such like.
Yeah, yes, and that's like there's a meme out there. How come there's no ghost from the 90s that jumps out and goes, "It's pretty, bitch."
Yeah, exactly. Well, there we are. Yeah, that's
you
always the
do see
white
those.
lady from 16 to 25, isn't it? And the other point is, when people claim to have had a past life, why do they never admit that they basically were a dung collector for King Henry VIII? They're always some Egyptian goddess or such like, that they were the Duke of, Jambon all those years ago, that they're some kind of grand individual. They never admit, yes, I used to go around collecting buckets of piss for the local tanner.
So To answer the first question, um, you will see ghosts in different environments, and in different.
Why have I never seen one?
Why have you never? So, okay, so I will share a story about my mother.
Hmm.
My mother is a non-believer, and she is very intuitive, but it freaks her out, quite frankly. She's very intuitive with all of the children, me and my siblings. And she, again, like, perfect example, was traveling in Scotland and woke up, and there was a man standing at the end of the bed glaring at her angrily, and she tried to
Had you
wake my
not paid a
father up.
bar bill?
What's that?
Had you not paid a bar bill?
Well, that's what she thought. She thought it was someone, staff, and she goes, "What is he doing in the room?" And she tried to wake up my father, and as she went to shake my father, he dissipated, and she
Okay.
said he had no legs. So, there is one circumstance. Now, my mother lives in a historic home, and it was built in 1890. Historic for America.
Mhm.
And she has already told us that she's going to haunt the house. So she said, "I'm not leaving." And I said, "Okay, well, that's fine." Their house does have some activity in it, does have some interesting effects in there. My grandmother, who has passed away, she actually passed away in the house. She saw a woman that looked like she was in 1940s gear walking outside the house about 4 o'clock in the morning. And she thought it was someone that we knew. And she went downstairs and stood with the door open. And the person never arrived at the door. And then she, went to bed, freaked out, and didn't sleep.
Mm.
So, we will see different types of individuals. So, one of my husband's experiences, my husband lost his best friend in 2020. And this was really the moment that my husband became a believer. There was a lot of activity in our house the day his best friend passed away, and a number of people had gathered here, and everyone kind of sensed him. He was a quite gregarious person, and everyone had sensed him here. And my husband admitted some months later, I never even felt him here. And I like, why did everyone feel him except for me? And I said, "Oh my God, that's terrible." I said, "Ask him to come visit you. Ask him." And sure enough, a few nights later, it was early in the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning. I had gotten up to get coffee, and my husband, he works shift work. He had come to bed, and as I left the room, he showed up, and they had a nice conversation. Let's just put it that way. They had a nice conversation. It did put my husband at ease. Very funny, typical conversation. And when I walked in, my husband told me what happened, and I said, "Well, was it a dream, or did you really see him?" And he said, "I absolutely saw him. When you walked in the door, you kind of dissipated him like smoke." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, that's kind of neat." I said, "Good for you." It's ghosts are a very interesting thing. I work with a group, New Jersey Paranormal, and I know one of the guys since childhood that works with them. It's a vocation for him. And I've gone to a few events with them, and there are actual intelligent hauntings where the ghosts are actually doing things and kind of interacting with people. And then there's residual hauntings where it's just kind of a recording, if you will. That's the lady in white. People see the lady in white jumping off a bridge or walking across the moors or whatever.
Mm.
And those are just heightened emotional moments where we may get to see that recording if we're so in tune, if we're so willing to see it. So people that don't want to see ghosts won't see them. And that's something that my students will say to me, like, "Are weird things going to start happening here?" And I'm like, "Well, no." I go, "But if things start moving around your house, you can call one of the networks, and they'll write you a check for $1 million and set up cameras in your house, and